Okay, so you want to run the Roman Empire. You've got 50 million subjects, 5,500 kilometers of paved roads, and an army that hasn't lost a war in 200 years. On paper, this is the greatest business ever constructed. Here's the strange part. Rome was the only empire in history where the more land you conquered, the faster you went broke. And by the end of this video, you'll know exactly how that's possible, how Rome actually made its money, why having the most powerful military on earth still wasn't enough to stay solvent, and why the Roman Empire isn't really the empire most people think it is. The entry cost. First, the price of getting in. Rome had 3 tiers of power, and their 3 completely different financial commitments. At the bottom, a local magistrate. To run for aedile in Rome, the official responsible for public games and grain supply. You didn't just need votes, you needed to personally fund the games. Julius Caesar spent the equivalent of millions hosting gladiatorial spectacles before he held any real power. That was just the application fee. 1 tier up, a provincial governor. You'd manage a territory the size of France, collect taxes on behalf of Rome, and take your cut. Lucrative, unless your province had 3 bad harvests in a row, at which point the deficit came out of your own estate. And then there's the top, emperor. Augustus, the first real one, spent more than 2.4 billion sesterces of his own money keeping the empire running. Roads, grain distributions, military campaigns, veteran pensions, all documented in his own records. He personally funded shortfalls in the public treasury at least 4 separate times. That sounds impressive until you realize the alternative was a riot, a coup, or both. The revenue mechanism. Now the question that actually matters. Where did the money come from? Every province in Rome was mathematically structured to produce more than it consumed. Not in a charitable sense, the system was engineered. Rome's equivalent of the house edge was a 3-part extraction machine: taxation, tribute, and slave labor arbitrage. The tributum, Rome's provincial tax, ran at roughly 10% of agricultural yield per year. Sounds modest. Multiplied across 45 provinces and tens of millions of farming households, and you're looking at the largest sustained revenue stream in the ancient world. But Rome didn't collect it directly. They outsourced it. Publicani, private tax farming companies, would bid for the right to collect taxes in a province. They'd pay Rome up front, then extract whatever they could from the population. Rome got guaranteed revenue. The Publicani got the margin. The provincials got squeezed. It was the player's club card of antiquity. Perfectly engineered extraction, running on autopilot at scale. And then there was Egypt. When Augustus conquered Egypt in 30 BC, he didn't treat it like a province. He treated it like a private account. Egypt produced roughly 1/3 of Rome's total grain supply. Augustus banned senators from even visiting without permission. It was the slot machine in the basement, too profitable to let anyone else near it. In a good year, the system worked flawlessly. The math was almost as clean as a casino floor. Almost. The costs nobody warns you about. Out of every sesterce of imperial revenue, somewhere between 60 and 80% was gone before you saw anything, and by the height of the empire, it was closer to the top of that range. Here's where it went. The legions. Rome maintained 28 to 33 legions at any given time under the early empire, roughly 150,000 to 175,000 men. A basic legionary earned 225 denarii per year under Augustus. Domitian raised it to 300. Septimius Severus pushed it to 450. Each raise was a political survival move. Each raise also quietly accelerated the empire's long-term insolvency. Then there were the donatives. Every time a new emperor took power, he paid every soldier in Rome a cash bonus just to secure their loyalty. When Claudius took the throne in 41 AD, he paid the Praetorian Guard 15,000 sesterces per man. In 93 AD, the Guard decided to skip the politics entirely. They auctioned the emperorship openly, to the highest bidder. Didius Julianus won for 25,000 sesterces per soldier. He lasted 66 days before being executed. This is the casino's payroll problem, but worse. Your most important employees can fire you. And then there's the grain dole. At its peak, 200,000 Roman citizens received free grain every month. The annona, not a charity program, a political non-negotiable. Cut it and you don't have a riot, you have a revolution. The math gives you a guaranteed top line. Everything below it is a fistfight. The bankruptcy patterns. Empires can fail for many reasons, but 3 patterns show up over and over again. Caligula inherited 2.7 billion sesterces from Tiberius, the largest treasury surplus in Roman history, spent it in less than a year. Banquets, spectacles, a floating bridge of boats across the Bay of Baiae, just to ride a horse across it, because a fortune teller once said he had as much chance of becoming emperor as of riding across that bay. Same mistake as every overextended casino operator, spending on spectacle before stabilizing costs. The crisis of the 3rd century. Between 235 and 284 AD, Rome cycled through dozens of emperors in 50 years, counting legitimate rulers, co-emperors, and regional claimants, Historians put the number anywhere from 20 to 50 depending on where you draw the line. Every single one came to power by promising soldiers bigger donatives than the last guy. Every single one went broke trying to deliver. Wrong product for the market. Buying loyalty you can't sustain with money you don't have. Revel Casino opened for high rollers who never came. Rome's 3rd century emperors opened for an army that always came and always demanded more. Diocletian's currency debasement. By the late 3rd century, Rome's silver denarius contained about 2% actual silver, 2%. The rest was copper. When you can't raise the house edge, you start shaving the coins. Inflation followed. Confidence collapsed. The math didn't stop working, it just started working against Rome instead of for it. The real numbers. So let's put this together. Annual revenue, approximately 800 million to 1 billion sesterces. Military costs, somewhere between 60 and 80% of the budget. Infrastructure, grain dole, administration, most of what's left. Net surplus, real but thin. Enough to build the Pantheon, not enough to absorb a single lost province. Realistic scenario, 3rd century, revenue collapsing as trade routes destabilize. Army demanding raises every decade. Border pressure on every frontier simultaneously. An empire without reliable tax revenue isn't an asset, it's a liability with legions attached. The difference between a solvent empire and a collapsing one wasn't military power, it was cash flow. Rome didn't fall because it was weak, it fell because it kept spending like the good years would last forever, and eventually they didn't. The house edge was real, the house just forgot to manage everything underneath it. Build the greatest empire in history if you want. Just make sure you know exactly when the math stops working.